Alright, so once this is all dry, which is looking pretty nice, we are going to add even more darks. So I'm going to try and get a little bit of this 231, which I believe is a black. Now I'm not going to go too far with this black here. I'm just going to go a little bit. So I'm going to take my 194, which is our dark brown again, and just mix that in real quick. I'm going to mix that in. So it kind of creates a bit of a warm gray. And then once that's nice and dark, I'm going to add more of that 197 just to give it some tint. So it's a little bit darker than this one here. So I'm just going to add that at the very, very, deep corners. So you can see how dark that is now. I'm going to add that to the very back. Just adding that bit of brown really makes it a lot more darker. So I'm adding it pretty densely. I don't have as much water on my brush as I usually do because I want the color to be pretty saturated. So I have very little water on my brush, and that's how I can get a really nice deep color. So you see how that looks? It looks fantastic. I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'm just going to add a slight touch. I'm also going to add a little bit of this darker brown down here as well, just so I can differentiate. So use this really, really dark color sparingly. You don't want to use it too much. Just want to put it in the darkest areas. And even then, I might want to make it a little bit darker, just to get super, super dark spots. But that's not exactly the most necessary. It's only for accents. So in these inner parts, you want to add that nice brown. Make sure you have a paper towel with you so you can wipe, bits of paint off. Maybe it's a shadow. Hair is probably the part that takes a bit, kind of like the longest, because you have to layer so much. I'm gonna add a little bit of these dark areas around the eyebrows as well. There. I still feel like it needs just a little bit more, but I am going to stop for this part, and I'm just going to go and finally get to the lower bits. So lower bits is just going to be the same thing I'm going to be using and layering a bunch. So I'm going to use my big brush this time once again. I'm going to be basically just once again rinsing this with water. Since there's a little bit of an orange tinge on the water already, so and the color of the hair is pretty brown, I'm not too worried about it being kind of colored. So I'm just adding all the wet spots. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to take a little bit of that brown, that 95, or sorry, 197 right there. I'm going to use that with a little bit of the orange just to give it a nice wash. This is going to be our light wash. Then we're going to wait until it dries, and then we're going to add more colored layers on it. And don't worry if it's like light and you're coloring over the lines. That's okay, because when we get into the darker parts, you're not going to be able to see any of this light stuff anyway. So don't worry about that. If you need a refill, go ahead and do that. I'm going to add a little bit more paint. So all this is now blocked in. And I'm just going to wait for that to dry, and I don't know what just dropped. Oh, that was my charger. I'll pick that up later. So we're going to wait for that to dry, and in the meantime, I'm going to try and find a darker dark. So I'm going to do a little bit of a different thing now. I'm going to mix a bit of my 176 now, which is like a nice violet. And I'm going to put it on the side here. And I'm going to put in my 197, my brown, and I'm going to mix that together. That'll create a nice, rich brown. And I'm also going to mix that with my 194. And that looks really, really nice. I'm going to use that. Whoa. So notice how rich that looks now. Just adding a little bit of that. Adding a little bit of red goes a long way. Or kind of like, not really red, but more of like a violet. Kind of ruined it there. Actually, what I will do is that I will go ahead and take and blot out a little bit of that pigment so it's not too dark. There. I'm still going to use a little bit of this tinge here just to kind of add a little bit of richness to my hair. So adding a little bit of red or violet to browns will make it really shine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to darken a little bit of the hair. So I'm going to take a, let me see here, no, I'm going to take a 05. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start lining a little bit of the hair just to kind of make it stand out a little bit, because right now the brown ain't cutting it. So I'm going to use a little bit of this black to stand it out, make it stand out. So notice how much darker that looks now. I like adding it close to the face so that, kind of really livens it up. So far so good. Now this should be dry enough, so I'm going to add some more colored layers on top. So I'm going to, with my thin brush, I'm going to be using my dark. So I'm going to be using a bit of 194 into this. And now I am going to be painting. Getting some darker colors on top. This one, I'm going to leave a little bit of light on the edges. On the underside, I'm going to leave a little bit darker. This is a little bit light, so I'm not going to use as much water in this one. So the less water you have, the more color. But the more water you have, the more it blends nicely. So you got to choose between the two, which one you want. You can even add a little bit of saturated tone in the middle as well, so you can have like a little bit of a gradient. So that's another viable option. If only you guys can see my whole work setup, then you guys can see what colors I'm choosing. But I'm really just choosing the same ones, you know, 197, which is this burnt sienna color, and a little bit of this 194. I'm just using that. A little bit of this 71, just to give it a nice nuttier color. So notice how once I color in the darker values, the lighter values that escape the lines, you don't really see them as much anymore. So that's why I'd say don't worry if you color over the lines when you're doing your base colors. I'm making this part a little bit darker because I want the arm to show better. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And a little bit of that highlighted color. We're just going to add a little bit of a gap for the highlights. And notice that, you know, when you don't have enough water, it dries quickly. So you just got to work a little bit faster for that. You can use a little bit more water if you need to. So we're almost done with the hair. Now we're going to wait for that to dry. And then we're going to add a little bit more darks. So I'm going to add my 194, which is our really dark brown, with our 197 again. And use that concentrated color to paint in areas that are a lot drier now. So areas behind the flowers. The crevices, you can add more strands as well, just to make it a little bit more interesting. Make sure that if you're going to make a very pure color, don't add too much water. That makes it easier to color. I'm just adding a little bit of shadow on the undersides here. So notice how that starts flowing in comparison to the upper part. So you can see that there's like a little bit of a fade away, and that's what I want, because I don't want, you know, everything to be super dense either. I want there to be like really dense area on the face, and then as it, you know, fades out, I want it to be a little bit not as dense. Of course, if you need to add more paint, go and make more by mixing number 194, 197, and a little bit of 71. You can still spread a little bit of that color around there. So that's looking a lot better. It's starting to match the value scale a little bit more. So it's starting to look more cohesive now. Now I'm going to just do the same thing on the other side. Add a little bit more darks. Add a little bit of more darkness, just to show some different sides to the hair. And then last but not least, we have the last bit of hair at the bottom, which doesn't really need as much attention as the other front bits. So we have the front or the back of the hair, and then now the top part of the hair pretty much mostly done. All I really want to do now is add my darks. I'm gonna add a little bit of water. My darks, the same colors that I've been using, and use them to accentuate the braids of her hair, because right now it's just not standing out very well. That looks a little bit better. There. That definitely looks a lot better. I'm going to add a little bit to these braids as well. I'm going to add a little bit of texture by kind of painting in my midlines here. There. So that's pretty much it for the hair. Now we're going to get to the eyes, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.